Kia ora everyone. Thank you for coming to our September GEOTalk with GEOID, the Geoeducation and Outreach branch of the Geoscience Society of New Zealand. Today we're very lucky to be hearing from Dr. Marion Tan, who is a lecturer at Massey University, affiliated with their Joint Centre for Disaster Research. And today she's going to be talking to us about CRISiSLab, but specifically the CRISiSLab Challenge. So I'll let her give you the details. Over to you, Marion.
Thanks, Jenny. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Marion Tan, and as Jenny said, I'm a lecturer at Massey University, and I'm part of what we call the Joint Center for Disaster Research. And within that, we have a laboratory called the CRISiSLab. And within this CRISiSLab, we have an outreach program. So so just to give a bit of background. So my background is I'm a social scientist, and I help really the science communication of the work that we do at CRISiSLab. So CRISiSLab is not just geosciences, it's really more into disaster management and crisis management. And really what the mission of the CRISiSLab is that we try to advance technology-driven solutions in crisis management in New Zealand. And we bring together students and researchers from different universities, agencies to study the design, implementation, evaluation of technological tools for crisis management. And because we are in New Zealand, a lot of the hazards that we face are actually geohazards. So a lot of the focus of the work that we do involves geosciences and geohazards. And so for our outreach and education program is that we want to encourage people, and especially students, to really try to understand technology a little bit more and how it can help promote our resilience and help people get interested in doing crisis management. So forgive me a little, I'm not really a geoscientist, but I hopefully, what I will share you today would be quite interesting. So under our outreach and education program, we have what we call the CRISiSLab Challenge. And really, our idea here is that we want to engage with school, engage in sciences, and really encourage people to be in the science, technology, engineering, mathematics subjects. So studies abroad have shown that if we, a lot of these school engagement really have benefits to society. And we've seen like in seismometers in schools programs, there's different benefits. It includes providing data for earthquake research. It can improve communities' understanding of earthquakes, and therefore they start having conversations about preparedness. And really, it also encourages students to be more interested in the sciences. So here's a photo of one of the outreach programs that we've conducted with a seismometer. And just really, we went to Rotorua Primary, tried to show the kids, how does a seismometer work? What does it record? It's just really to spark their interest. So seismometers are really great tools for engagement because there's this physical, thing that they can see, and then they can see data to be translated into a computer. And that helps them understand how we record data, how that data can be used for science. So it's also really great because it's an avenue for a lot of programs to perhaps donate a seismometer for the schools, and they can put it in their libraries and can see ground motion and stuff. So this is a photo in Mga Tapu School, and this is with existing seismometers in school programs, not ours, with the RU network in University of Auckland. So they're really great tools for engagement. However, there's also some challenges in running seismometers in schools program. So one is, will people have continued use and interest of these seismometers? So for example, a case in Nepal, they don't really have great instrumentation in Nepal. So one of the projects and programs there is to install seismometers in schools because, the schools are gateways to communities, and it'll help develop a network for them. So in Nepal, it's quite clear that, this is going to help the monitoring of earthquakes for the communities. And there's like a clear memorandum of agreements, who's going to be monitoring. And there's like a set location in the school where the seismometers are set. And then, they use platforms for people to watch the waveforms, and etc. And the installation of these seismometers are also really proper in a sense. Somebody comes and make sure that it's on a good platform. It's not going to be disturbed by movements and so on. However, sometimes these seismometers in schools programs, they may end up sitting in dusty shells. So when we were starting about doing our outreach and engagement in CRISiSLab, we visited a school in St. Mary's, and they said, "Oh, we actually have a seismometer here that's recording data," and they showed this thing to us. And I said, "Okay, what does this do? Have you used it for the schools?" And they have no clue what it is for. It's still plugged in, and it's still blinking, but the school has no idea who's running this program. They have no idea who's, reading the data. Teachers have moved on. It's probably installed in the 2000s or even earlier. It's still plugged in, but nobody knows. It's like a huge black box. So they asked us, and we're like, we don't have no clue. We don't know who's monitoring this seismometer. So there's that tendency as well. These seismometers in schools, although they are great for engagement, is that perhaps they won't last as long, and they might be left in schools, and they might be connected to a network, but people might not really know what they are for, and they are no longer used by the teachers. So there's a question of the challenges for continuity. It's always a challenge to run outreach and education programs because we always need funding. Also, the challenge of teachers leaving, and then this knowledge is not passed on to the next teacher, and school teachers are super busy, so it just gets stuck in the shell. So there's becoming just like also waning interest. So this is another example. So I went to the Chatham Island this year, and there's in their museum they have this seismometer, and this was installed in one of their schools a long time ago, and it's same story as the St. Mary's School seismometer. Eventually, teacher moved on. People didn't really know what it was, and then it ended up in the museum. so there's that tendency to, if there are really great seismometer in schools programs, how do we make sure that they're there for the long run, or if not in the long run, it's just how do we pass on this knowledge? And yeah, that's really a big question. It's very interesting, but there's also always that challenge. So when we were starting our CRISiSLab outreach and engagement, we thought we don't want to be the provide a seismometer that will get stuck in a dusty shell. So we brainstormed a little. What can we do to get people interested in seismometers and monitoring ground motion, and just get them interested, and how can we make sure that this is something that will continue year after year? Well, at least that's our objective, right? So as part of the CRISiSLab, we really employ this concept called design science, and not just in our outreach and education, but in our research. And basically, it's an iterative process of designing something. So we use the same concept when we try to think about how do we want to create this outreach engagement. So we came up with the concept of CRISiSLab Challenge, and this is an annual competition. So that's our starting point. But what we wanted to make sure that whatever we develop is actually quite useful for the community. So the teachers, the students, the funders, as well as, it's embedded in the context of, what sensor will we use? Will schools be engaged? What are the challenges in the schools' IT networks? And make sure whatever we design, these requirements are taken into consideration once we design our outreach program. And at the same time, we also want to make sure that our outreach program has a strong knowledge foundation. So it comes with, outreach and engagement concepts. It's also tied up with really good IT, and then seismology, and also science communication. Then, of course, we're constantly evaluating and improving. So we started this in 2020. We started this concept, but we didn't implement it right away. So the first thing that we did is we went into schools, and then we, talked to some teachers that are quite interested. And this is usually true existing networks. So we talked to them about different types of sensors that we may be using for this concept of the CRISiSLab challenge. And then, we look at what the capabilities of our students, what support do they need. Also, we contacted people from Raspberry Shake, which is, I don't know if the people in this audience would know, it's a small personalized seismometer developed somewhere in Panama. And yeah, so we talked to them and see what are their education programs, how can we tie into what we intend to do in New Zealand. So it took us a bit of a year of planning of what we wanted to do, and we started the concept with 6 schools, and then we launched our first CRISiSLab challenge in New Zealand last year in 2021. So I'll stop sharing for now, and I'll show you a quick video, and just a really nice, give you a glimpse of what happened last year. And I'll talk to a little bit more about what's the concept or what's the process. Yep. Okay, share sound. Cool. I hope that was a little bit interesting. Yeah, so we have around 53 students who participated over 6 colleges in the Wellington region. And the overarching aim of the challenge was to give the students an end-to-end experience of observation skills. So they had the Raspberry Shake to do observation skills. They analyzed the data streams, and they had to learn a little bit about computer programming, and then they created this once something is detected from their Raspberry Shake to trigger an alert. And also they learned how to try to show the waveforms in the form of a dashboard. So it's kind of an end-to-end experience, and it was really fun. Yeah, so what was involved in that 2021 challenge? So basically we start with giving the 6 schools, a Raspberry Shake to their science teachers, and have communication with the teachers saying, this is what we want to do. Who do you think might be interested from your class? And if they don't have any idea about coding or whatever, it's fine. We're going to try to provide as much support as we can throughout the process. And then in May, we officially launched the challenge. So we invited the students to come to Massey University. We had a bit of a workshop and a bit of giving them just an idea of what is a Raspberry Shake, have a bit of a icebreaker, get to know the students. So it was an event. And remember, this is 2021. This was before Omicron and everything. So we were able to do this quite freely without any restrictions in terms of numbers or wearing masks or whatever. And then we told them in that launch day, this is your task. You are to create a dashboard that will read data from the Raspberry Shake. And then from a certain threshold, we want you to create an alerting device. Once a threshold is hit, we want your alerting device to be, creative or whatever. So we didn't really restrict them what that device would be, because we wanted them to be excited, have their own idea of what they want this alerting device will look like, and then we asked them to present. We wanted to present their system. So it was over 8 weeks, and we had weekly catch-ups online via Zoom, and just to troubleshoot any problems or if they have any questions. We also provided internet resources, and this is thanks to our collaboration with Raspberry Shake as well, and they have like really great educational resources. And then we asked them to come back in August, and then they did their presentations, as you saw in the video. And then we left the seismometers to the schools, and it was up to the teachers what they wanted to do with that seismometer, whether they wanted to use it in their class or other extracurricular activities. So it was pretty interesting. One is that we invited a girls' school, which is, as you can have seen in the video, a lot of them are boys. But we also want to increase really engagement in the sciences with girls and to get women in STEM. And so this is what I'm really proud of them because they named their group called She Can. And this group, they had no idea of coding or robotics or even seismology or anything, but they went through the process and they really created what we wanted them to create. And yeah, and just like an anecdotal success story, I accidentally bumped into one of these girls after the challenge, and I asked her, "Oh, how are you?" And and then she said, "Oh, I'm actually going to University of Auckland, and I've decided to take up computer sciences, and it's thanks to being engaged in this CRISiSLab challenge." So I think that was a really good outcome for me. It's like really inspiring students to pursue or at least gain interest in the sciences. We also made sure that we invited Kura, this is the Kura Maori Oporirua, because we also want to increase the sciences with our Maori youth. And the teachers were also really, they were really engaged as well. They really wanted to encourage the students to participate, but also to have the Te Ao Maori perspective as well. So the reason why we gave them free hand to create their alerting device is a chance for them to be creative. So this is Romoko holding a waka, and then it lit up when the threshold of was met, and then it started moving and so on. So it's just really to encourage kids to, have fun, but also get some interested, and also weaving in different knowledges as well in their presentation. And it's really great because then, you saw the girls who presented She Can, and then you see this Kura to also show their own perspectives and their own knowledge and being able to share it to a wider community. And I thought that was really pretty cool. The winners for the challenge were from the Wellington College, and they created an app, and the winners actually win an internship with us at the CRISiSLab. So they worked the summer with us, and this is one of their outputs from their summer internship was they help us create this dashboard for our work that we do in our research space, creating an experimental ground motion detection sensor network. So yeah, they're really talented, these kids, and after their internship, they wanted to continue to help us with our research. So we've now contracted them to be our research assistants on a part-time basis, on a project basis. So yeah, it was super cool. And I guess this is the thing we want to encourage kids to be interested and join and be engaged in the work that we do as well. So yeah, so that was 2021, I think was fairly successful. In 2022, we tried to improve our program. And this time, we had 21 teams from 12 schools initially participating. So it was a huge interest. So we had to find a way to make this possible with a larger cohort of students joining in. So we divided up the challenge into 2 phases. And then, so after the first phase, 9 teams from 7 schools made it to the second round, and finally 4 teams from 4 schools came to Massey University to compete for the demonstration day. So this is, I guess, a testament to increased interest, that we have more schools participating in the region, and our vision is to be able to expand this even further. So yeah, so we just finished our 2022 challenge. So I don't have a lot of photos yet because we're still processing all the photos or all the great things that happened last week. But this is just a snapshot of some of us during the challenge. And as you can see, Ben and Zaid are winners from last year. They helped us this year. So they were one of the tech teams that tried to support just the current students with their challenge. So I think this is really great, because it's also showing the current students, the skills that these two have developed, and now they're supporting the challenge itself. Yeah, so some variations of the challenge this year. So like I said, we had to make it 2 phases because we had a lot more schools interested, and also because of COVID. So we didn't know when we started it in May what the COVID situation will be like in the next few months. So we tried to make it online first. So the first phase was for the students to create an online video submission on ground observations using the Raspberry Shakes. So we still gave Raspberry Shakes to all of our schools, and we left it up to them to install the sensors, read the sensors, and to create a video of their key observations. So it could be earthquakes, it could be ground motion from trucks passing. So that's we left it up to them to create their own creative videos. And then, of course, from there, the best schools we invited to enter the second phase that led up to the demonstration day last week. So the difference this time as well, rather than just triggering from one sensor, we asked the students to work with 2 sensors this time. We had to innovate a little bit because things have to slightly change from one year to the other. Just because students can rejoin if they wanted to. Yeah, so some key challenges for us as this is just our 2nd year running it, is that of course COVID-19. With the revolving situation, we didn't know whether we would be able to do an online or face-to-face event. But also the students were struggling quite a lot. If you guys remember that, at the beginning of Omicron, a lot of teachers were sick, a lot of students were sick, or students had to be isolating. So yeah, so a lot of challenges in that aspect, and we had to be a little bit more empathetic with the students if they can't meet the deadlines, or they needed more time to submit their videos, or needed more time to understand, or if they couldn't make it to some of the meetings. Also, some of the challenges is also teachers are really overloaded, and some of them don't have the capacity to support. So some schools actually pulled out. Yeah, and like I said, some students they had to drop off. They just had to prioritize their academics, but as well as being sick, and also so some students had to drop off. Some challenges as well. This Raspberry Shake, they're new to the school, so we have to provide a lot of support. There's also firewalls with the school that we have to figure out how to weave around that, and so that they could access the data in their school system. And what we've learned through these last 2 years is that we do really need to provide a lot of support and resources for the schools to make this work. So one of the challenges is similar to the challenges of the other seismometer in school programs that I've talked about, but there's also kind of opportunities. So what we've seen is that there's huge appetite to promote STEM and earthquake resilience in New Zealand. So there is some funding available that helps us do this challenge. And also because I guess what's different from us is that we're not intending to install seismometers throughout New Zealand. So I guess our scope is a little bit smaller. So we're not out there to distribute a lot of sensors, but actually engage with schools that want to learn about a little bit more about our challenge. So we don't have to distribute a lot of sensors. And then these sensors can also be returned back to us if the school don't need them for their curricular activities. And then we can just lend another seismometer in the future. So we have a stock of seismometers that we can circulate in a sense for the schools. And also because it has been a huge success last year and this year, we have huge support from the Raspberry Shake people as well. And also because one of their outreach and engagement person has moved on to Alaska Earthquake Center. So there's this potential collaboration to even make this maybe an international or a bilateral competition between maybe students in New Zealand and students in Alaska. So those are the opportunities that we're looking at for the next year. Of course, there's still a lot that we need to work on. So just returning back to the concept of the science, we have to definitely evaluate what has happened last week and over the last few months and see where we can actually improve, how we need to engage with the teachers, especially the teachers that have supported us with the last 2 years. You know, to ask them, how can we improve? What are the key challenges? And also continue working with the schools, with the IT networks, and also coming back to, you know, what is it that we want to impart with our students. So far, a lot of the outcomes has been, you know, interest in coding and programming and networking, but we also want to really encourage, and that's the reason why I took this opportunity to speak in this geoscience network, because we also want to encourage more interest in the earth sciences. So what have we done differently from the other seismometer in school programs that we've seen worldwide? For sure, our activity is extracurricular in approach. It's not integrated into the curriculum of the students. I don't know. I don't have the answer whether that is good or bad, but it definitely gets us students that are really interested in this aspect. So that's a pro. We have students that are really interested in this, but the con as well is that, are we only reaching out to students that are already inherently quite interested in the science and technology, and how do we make a wider reach? But I guess the answer to that is like what we said, the approach that we've had so far is like, we're not just engaging with top schools, like we've engaged with lower decile schools, we've engaged with all girls schools, we've engaged with Dakota. So I guess it is a responsibility on our part from the organizers of this challenge is, you know, we're not just inviting the best of the best schools, but trying to broaden the reach of who are we inviting to take part in this challenge. So far, it has been a good approach, having an extracurricular approach. It's definitely, there is some challenges because will be on top of the students' workload, but most of them are super keen. And anyway, so the other thing is that, unfortunately, we're not establishing a network of seismometers. But so that's, you know, we're not going to get data that will support our science for our CRISiSLab. But I think we've made a conscious decision that is not the most important part of this seismometer in school program. What we want to do is that these seismometers are not left in dusty shelves, but we really encourage students to prod and experiment. So that's why the challenge that we've given them is, you know, try to jump one person, will it trigger the threshold, or jump 5 person, will it trigger the threshold to create your alerts? Or when we ask them to do the 2 sensor activity, yeah, so really our encouragement is that they prod, they, you know, some of the teachers like, oh, the students might break it. And for us, our response is, it's all right if they break it, you know, of course, it's not really just all right, but if they break it, maybe that's the way we can see that they're actually really engaged with the program, is that they're really interested to see how the Raspberry Shakes perform. So what we've seen so far is that how we've designed this competition, the inspiration has been a hybrid of a hackathon. It's not a 24 hackathon overnight thing. It's prolonged over 1 or 2 terms. Wherein there is like a program wherein we get the students to get interested in the sensor, we get them to try to retrieve the data, we get them to be able to show that data on the dashboard. So that's over 6 to 8 weeks. And then there's a bit of a robotics aspect as well, wherein they create their devices, and this is where the creativity comes. And that really was thanks to talking to a science teacher in one of the schools. Because he said, oh, a seismometer, it's really boring. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. He said, let's get the kids to do something fun. So he was the one who suggested that, can the kids make something that will be triggered by the seismometer? And I guess this is really where, when we have these conversations with the teachers, that we get really, really great ideas. So yeah, so now our vision is that this will be held annually. And that's hopefully create a bit of more sustainability or more long-term vision that these seismometers will be used year on year, and hopefully we get to engage with the schools. So all the schools from last year participated this year, and we hope that there's this kind of continual participation from the schools, really. Yeah, so that's all for my presentation. I have some questions for the group, but I'm happy to take questions as well. And because we've just finished our CRISiSLab Challenge 2022. My question is, we can open up this for discussion, is, like I said, our focus has been a lot on technology. How can do you guys have any ideas, incorporate a bit more of the geosciences in the challenge? Is there anyone who's interested to collaborate us for the next year? Would you know any schools or teachers that haven't engaged with us that might be interested to be part of this challenge next year? So that's it, really. And hopefully you've enjoyed my talk, and happy to take questions. I'll stop sharing.
Kia ora, Marion. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll open it up to the floor for people to chime in and answer your questions before we move on. John.
Well, thank you for a wonderful talk. I really enjoyed it. I've heard about the CRISiSLab. In fact, we're the ones who are funding the group in Alaska to do the same, to try to follow your example in Alaska.
Oh,
and so
great.
I think I really like you've just done it all right. You really have figured out how to engage the students. I completely agree that it's the interaction, not the networking. I will mention, though, that the dusty old seismograph sitting on the shelf at St. Mary's is one I put in about
sorry about that.
3 years ago. So
yeah.
it's a great example. We tried that originally. We were the first group in New Zealand to do that, but then I left New Zealand to come to the US for 20 years, and we didn't have a champion to keep going. We also made a lot of mistakes. So I think you've really figured out what's the core of engaging the students, and I like that. So I guess my question to you is, you mentioned you want to keep this going. I see you've got some EQC funding. What is it? What do you have to do to keep it going?
Yeah, so definitely that's one of the questions that keep me up at night. It's like, I'm pretty sure that EQC is quite happy to fund us for next year, but of course we have to apply for those funding as well. But we do have some funding streams that we are currently thinking of. We're constantly thinking of funding, and hopefully, yeah. And I don't know the team for sure, because we need the team. The team's like really interested to keep this going. Whether I know they say that whether we have funding or not, we'll have a competition one way or another. But I guess the limit would be, how many seismometers can we actually put out there? If we want this to be bigger, then we do need a little bit more raspberry shakes out there for sure. Yeah, so this is I guess part of that design science cycle is that we make sure that our funders are also involved. So one thing is this year we invited Tokatuake EQC to fund us, and then we asked them to come and join the event itself, and we asked them to be a judge. And I think one of the questions in the chat was, how does this lead to earthquake resilience? So in our demonstration day, rather than just jumping straight to the competition, we had a bit of a program, in a sense that we talk about, a little bit about earthquake sciences, but also about preparedness. So we incorporate that in the activities. And then, we just incorporate that in terms of, how do you respond to earthquakes? And then EQC gave grab and go bag as prizes as well. So we were able to share that with the students. Of course, this is a success of this year. I don't know how we want to translate that to success next year. So we still have to continue planning. So we finished last year. We're just finishing up with some reporting, but the next step is start planning for the next year and look at, what are our sources of funding, and how do we make sure that there's this continued interest. But the good thing is the teachers are really interested. So all the teachers are like, yeah, we want to join in again next year. So please keep us updated and so on. So I think this is just having that constant conversation that we have with the teachers as well. Yeah. And sorry about the quick tracker. Honestly, I didn't know.
No, I think it was a wonderful initiative. It was a wonderful way to start it. And I mentioned the EQC funded us as well. So but I say we were just trying to learn things, and I think what you've done, you've really figured out how to really engage the students. And as you say, you don't need to have the seismometer sitting there forever, have them work on it, do a project. That's a great way to go.
Yeah, but it's, we learn, it's a process, I guess. That's the part of the science that we learned from the past, and that's why we're able to do it now, because not that I'm saying that we're learning from your mistakes or anything like that, but it's something that we're trying to progress and get more students involved with.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marion, and thank you, John. Are there any other questions from the audience today?
I think there's a question. Yep.
Kia ora, that was really interesting talk. It's really cool to hear about the CRISiSLab, and obviously this challenge is focusing on earthquakes and seismicity, but I'm just wondering if this, do you see this this model or template working on other geohazards like volcanology, extreme weather, sea levels and all that sort of thing, complex issues we're facing that are pretty much connected? I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. So really good question. So far right now we're focusing a lot on raspberry shake because that's the sensor that we have most investment on at the moment, but we're not limited to that. So aside, because at CRISiSLab, we're not limited to earthquakes, so we are working with other sensors as well. So definitely we could not easily, but think about expanding this to other aspects. So one of the things that we are looking at is I'm not sure if this is geosciences, but like air quality monitoring. So we do have sensors such as these ones, the one that measure air quality, and this can be translated to other hazards. It could be wildfires, or maybe if there's an eruption, we can monitor air quality. I don't know yet how we can translate that to a competition, but we could, if we could, think about what data we can actually access from them and see. So we're not limited to raspberry shakes. That's definitely, we're still iterating. This is our second year, so we're still iterating on how we can improve the seismometers better. There could be a spin-off, a different CRISiSLab challenge. I don't know.
Like it's an awesome project.
Wonderful. Glenn, you had a question.
Yes, first of all, congratulations, Marion, on doing the work that you're doing. Every little bit counts, and hello to John Tabor from a long time ago. These programs are really, really interesting, and hopefully they will continue to grow as the message gets out there, that there isn't a focus of an ability for people to be able to actually get into this sort of thing. So I just wondered whether you've connected with the Auckland group with seismometers for schools. I've been managing the Ashburton in South Island seismometer, and I think I've now analysed something like about 300 earthquakes. Wow. And there is an opportunity there for curriculum connection as well. Yeah. So I just wondered whether you've made any other connections with the Auckland
sure. So this is the RU network with Casper, I'm assuming. Yeah, so definitely in contact with them because they're doing a really great job, especially on the curriculum integration aspect. Yes. So they've done that really well. So definitely in contact with them. Right now we're kind of like working in parallel. We're not intersecting yet, but it's a really small network on people doing this outreach and engagement, so we do know of each other. And yeah, we're also collaborating actually, writing we're trying to summarize some of the key seismometer in schools programs in New Zealand. There's a few going on. I'm just trying to kind of find a common theme of what we're doing. Everyone has a different motivation and different
just objective. One other question, Marion. Have you got anything lined up for getting to the teachers and work from the top down?
With the teachers? Yeah, for sure. So before we started here, we actually attend one of the head of sciences meetings. So we've been invited to come to their head of science, head of school, head of department meetings. So
Yeah,
we at
usually
least
head
in
of
the
department.
yeah, head of department meetings. So in the Wellington region, we've come and talked to them, and yeah, so definitely there's some engagement in that, for sure.
Yeah, I think the more teachers that you get engaged, that will filter down. So I think you've got to do both approaches, from the kids up and the teachers down.
Yeah,
and then
thank
start
you.
on the parents.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's you know, the trickle effect, I guess. Yeah, but thanks. That's a really important point that you're making.
But thank you, Marion. I have enjoyed listening to that, and good luck for carrying on with this, and just keep going.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very encouraging. Thank you.
I do another follow-up question. You mentioned you needed also other kinds of support. So are you having, how big is your network of people that are helping with this that aren't teachers? And how big and what needs you have there?
So I guess the good thing is that it's based from our lab here. So we do have PhD students and the interns that we've hired from last year's challenge. So they pretty much do the support work for the students, like, you know, if they have any programming questions and stuff. So that's mainly coming from our CRISiSLab cohort. But that also means, you know, we have to need a constant supply of PhD students. But yeah, I think the model that we have now is that we're still offering the internship. So the winners this year will offer them internship, and hopefully they also get involved in supporting for next year's challenge as well. So that's.
And I didn't notice, were the schools just the Wellington region, or are you expanding it so it can be schools in the South Island as well, or?
So far we're in Wellington. It's still trying to get more schools in Wellington, but the vision is to go bigger, but you know, have to start somewhere. I showed you the photo in the Bay of Plenty, because that's an outreach that we've done that is not related to the CRISiSLab challenge. The schools there are quite interested, but just unfortunately we just don't have the current capacity to bring people outside Wellington, because they do have to travel and come here. But we'll have to look at different models to make that work.
The reason I asked is I'm moving back to Nelson in a few months. Now I'm retiring and moving back to New Zealand with my wife. So I'll actually be in New Zealand. I'll be and be happy to help out in some way if there's a way I can help.
Oh, thanks, John. Yeah, it'll be also interesting. You know, like you said, you're helping out with the Alaska Earthquake Center. So I think it's with Gabriel. Is that yeah? So we're connecting much more frequently now, and so, you know, I really want this to be maybe if we can get some students from New Zealand to go to Alaska, or some students from Alaska to come to New Zealand. I think that's a great inspiration for the students as well to connect internationally. So let's see. It's very exciting, but also lots of work. So yeah.
Lots of big dreams, it sounds like, which is awesome, because yeah, aim for the stars. And then hopefully people will see the value and provide the support and funding you need. I really like, just building on Glenn's comment, and something that caught my ear, Marion, in your presentation, was using schools as a gateway to the communities. And I think that's very true. And the standout things for this for me were, yeah, the opportunity for students to be creative and making their own kind of alert system, like building on the science, learning skills that they can use, but then having an opportunity to express those in their own way is wonderful. And then the follow through is the first time I've seen any program like this or engagement initiative where, you know, you've offered an internship at the end to keep, you know, the kids who are probably most invested on, and then some of them you've gone and given part-time jobs to as well. Like, it's the first time I've come across a program that does that, and I think it's just fabulous. Yeah, the seismologists of the future in your hands.
Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing is we've invited seismologists to be judges at the competition as well, so they get to talk with the kids and, you know, encourage them to, you know, get interested, you know, what are the jobs after, and, you know, maybe not jobs, but, you know, like showing them that there are people who go on to these fields and do these things. So we make sure to invite seismologists to come and judge, and they have opportunity to speak as well, to have a short kind of words of encouragement to the students. Yeah.
Fantastic, because that's often quite a big hurdle, particularly for some of the less well-resourced schools, in terms of the children, the students just don't see a pathway into STEM. Because it's just not something they have exposure to. It's, you know, they don't grow up expecting to go to university or things like that. So yeah, I'm sure you're helping inspire a future generation.
Well, that's the mission.
Yeah. We're just about out of time, but does anyone have any further questions for Marion, or do you have any closing comments, Marion, or final thoughts?
Yeah, just really, I'm happy to connect with all of you to, you know, like John, if you're back in Nelson, how we can make this better, how we can improve things. Really keen to get people involved and support us. Yeah, and thanks for giving this opportunity for me to share. And yeah.
Not at all. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much, Marion. And thank you all for coming. The recording of this talk will be made available on YouTube at a later date, so we can come back and refer if we need to. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Kia pai tōra. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
Marion.
Bye.
Kia ora.